Welcome to another episode of Theater Corner. I'm your host, Michael Taylor. Today, we're on location in front of the fabulous Old Globe Theater in San Diego, California. Theater Corner is an interview series created as an ongoing effort to promote more diverse interest and involvement in the theater scene. Silence your cell phones, folks, because you're about to enter Theater Corner. Patricia McGregor is an in-demand director, writer, and artist who's been twice profiled in the New York Times for her direction of world premieres. She was born in St. Croix in the Virgin Islands and moved all around the United States before studying directing at Yale School of Drama, where she was a Paul and Daisy Soros Fellow and Artistic Director of the Yale Cabaret. McGregor has since built an accomplished career that spans Broadway, off-Broadway, and regional theaters across the country. Last fall, she directed Shakespeare's Measure for Measure for the Old Globe's Globe for All program, an initiative that brings high-quality Shakespeare productions to theater spaces and underserved audience throughout San Diego County. Her other recent directing credits include the world premiere of Good Grief at the Kirk Douglas Theatre, the Parchman Hour at the Guthrie Theatre, and Ugly Lies, the Bone at the Roundabout Underground. Today, Patricia McGregor sits down with me in Theater Corner to talk about life behind the scenes, her creative process, and the importance of making Shakespeare matter to more people. Patricia McGregor, you're so welcome to be here at Theater Corner.
Thank you.
And this is a particularly especially nice interview because I consider you as a sister.
Thank you.
And me as your brother and me as an uncle to your beautiful son, Orion. And a brother to your husband, Freedom.
Yes.
Shout out to Freedom. Whoop, whoop.
Hi, honey.
So thank you so much for taking time out of your busy directing schedule to come here to Theater Corner. Let's start off by talking about your beginnings, because you went to a very prestigious school,
Thank you.
Yale School of Drama. And so when did you first develop an interest in directing as opposed to acting?
Well, storytelling has always been important to me. I was born in the Virgin Islands, and we were born going to Caribbean Dance Company. I feel like everyone in our family, if you go to a party, you've got to have a story. So storytelling has always been important to me. And then I performed for a long time. But directing didn't really come to me until I went to undergrad at SMU in Dallas. And it has a wonderful arts program, the Meadows School of the Arts. And it's a wonderful university, but there are also pretty deep racial tensions, or at least at the time there were. And I experienced some incidents that made me think I'm either going to get really mad, I'm going to explode, implode, or I've got to do something.
Okay.
So I've got to do something is always the best choice. And at that time, I read Athol Fugard's My Children, My Africa, wonderful play, and there wasn't a role in it for me. But I said, this story I feel needs to be told on this campus at this time. So without having any prior directing experience, I directed that play, and I got a wonderful actor, Kari Payton, who's now on The Walking Dead, who happened to be in Dallas at the time, SMU grad, got a wonderful cast, and I never thought I would love anything more than acting. I never thought I would love anything more than standing in front of an audience telling that story. But actually sitting behind the audience, watching the interaction of what we had created and the audience absorbing it. And that conversation, a light bulb went off. And I said, oh, this is where I really want to be. This is what I really want to be doing. And over the next few years, there was a transition. I was still doing some acting, still doing some writing. And I'm still interested in those ways of storytelling, but really putting it all together is the thing that's most satisfying, and I think where my skill set is best served. Or serves best, I should say.
And I do believe that. And as a director, some see the director as the unifying figure in a production. And I was wondering, how would you define your role as a director?
Well, it changes depending on the part of the process. So I say my main job is to take this one-dimensional thing and make it three-dimensional. So you receive this script, and it's my job to take that and flesh it out into the most meaningful, the most clear, the most exciting, the most poignant thing possible. So at different phases in a process, I would say when I first received the script, my job is, it's like excavation, right? I am trying to take this thin thing and dig in and find out all of the gold in it. Find out what it really means, find out what that turn of phrase means, so my first phase I would say is excavation, asking the writer questions, reading, doing my research, so kind of digging in the dirt. And then my second phase I would say is kind of a sculptor. So then I get the design team together and we create a world, and that world is a playground for all of the ideas, all of the things that we've excavated to come to life in this playground. So we really sculpt, and I have to unify with the team. I speak to them individually, but we have to create a unified world for this that is the playground for the ideas of the play. And then you get the actors. Casting is key. Key. Everyone says it, but it's so true. You get the right actors for that particular production. And then when I first get into the room, I consider myself a hype man. I mean, I get excited, there's a lot of energy in the room.
Right.
We play games, we do all of those things, which is partly about having fun, but partly about unifying a group of people. When you see them on stage, most of the time, these people have deep, intimate relationships and histories. And we come together for 6 weeks. So I kind of become the hype man. I try to bring everyone together, the cheerleader, get everyone their ideas flowing, make them feel comfortable, confident, and then I become the editor. Just before we go into technical rehearsals, I start saying, okay, we've put all of those things on the wall now. Everyone's had a chance to contribute. Now I've got to make some choices. We've got to edit it down. And then when we get into technical rehearsal, that's really when you're putting the lens on it and you're editing. And as a theater director, you don't have a DP. You don't have an editor. You're really using the design elements and trying to train the audience's eye. This is where I want you to look. This is how I want you to feel. So you're really kind of synthesizing the world and putting the lens on it. And by the very end, I become a taskmaster. So, and it's out of love, and hopefully the actors receive it out of love, but I give my notes on these little white notes. It's a process I received from Michael Greif when I was his assistant. I think he received it from Des McAnuff. But I feel every moment of a play is an opportunity to make someone feel something, to understand something. So, whereas in the beginning of the rehearsal room, we could be running around, every idea is possible, but by the end, I'll say, no, it might be more poignant if the light goes out here, not here. And hopefully the audience will take that moment, and it might push them over the edge to experience something that they might have been resisting. So I would say that's the journey insofar as I understand it, from excavator to sculptor to hype man to editor to kind of refinement taskmaster, and then you release the thing. And then it's kind of like you've done all your work, and it's hopefully you release that bird and you watch it fly.
It's going to do what it's going to do.
It's going to do what it's going to do, yeah.
But it seems like that synthesizing phase, that seems to demonstrate great directors from good directors. Separates those two. Yeah. And you clearly do that quite well.
Thank you.
You are one of the great directors.
Thank you.
And that's why you are in such demand.
Thank you very much.
And so, many people know you can't come to Theater Corner without talking about diversity and inclusion.
Yes.
So, we wanted to ask your opinion. What do you think we gained by an increase in advancing diversity and inclusion in the theater, or even in the film world for that matter?
Well, I think, first of all, it makes the work more interesting. If you're only looking at a small slice of the world, you're missing out on so much.
Right.
So first of all, it just makes for a richer experience. Second, as we're looking at how we define our democracy at its best is defined by inclusion. Our democracy is defined by the opportunity for every individual to have their shot, as they say in Hamilton. And so really being inclusive in the stories that we're telling is very important. And then bottom line, there have been a lot of studies right now that say not only is it the right thing to do, but it's the profitable thing to do.
There you go.
We live in a very diverse world, and even the term diversity kind of sometimes that sets a certain person in the center and everyone. And actually, when you look around, America is a very multicultural place.
Correct.
And we're moving in that direction more and more, statistically and in all kinds of ways. And so there have been studies that say the more diversity in a piece, the more ratings you're going to have. The more, the more people you're going to have in your audience, the more subscriptions you're going to sell. So it's not only the interesting thing to do, the right thing to do, it's becoming clear that it's the profitable thing to do as well. It's the sustainable thing to do. And so I think on every level, it's the direction that if people have their eyes open and are paying attention to what's going on, it's the direction that people are going to continue to follow.
I certainly agree. And so you're all over the country directing. You're pulled from East Coast or West Coast to the North, and you're a mother and your wife. How do you balance all of that? You're Superwoman,
Well, I thank you. Balance is a strange word when you think of that. I find, and I had a great friend, Susan Vargas, she's an international producer, and she'd say, you're never going to feel you're doing anything 100%, but you can do what's right in front of you 100%. Okay. So I try to pay attention to what's right in front of me at the time, and be the best I can in the room that I'm in.
Okay.
I find raising my son is the new organizing principle of my life. So every decision has to be made. I say no to a lot more work than I used to because I try to make sure that I can do the work very well, and then I can also have time to commit to my family. So you kind of look at what is that organizing principle, and when I step through the door of my home, I try to really be at home with them. And when I step through the door of the theater, I try to really be in the theater. So the transition points, because what a director really does, or part of your job, is really directing the transitions. So the transition moments are often the messy things, like from stepping through the door to my house, stepping through the door to the theater. Those things I understand. How you get the babysitter to get the drop off to all of those things. Orchestrating the transitions of my life is the most challenging part. But I hope when I step through each of those doors that I serve them as completely as possible.
All right, and you're doing it.
Thank you.
Doing it.
Try it.
Last summer, you directed a touring production of Hamlet at the Public Theater's mobile unit. And so I'm wondering, how do you shape a production like that for an audience that's unfamiliar with Shakespeare?
Well, I think that every Shakespeare show should be done as if no one knows anything about it. When Shakespeare was first produced, actually some of the stories, he pulled from stories, he pulled from folklore and different stories, but the way he crafted it, the audiences didn't know. They didn't come in with expectations about what Lear was going to be or what, the Tempest was going to be. They might have known the source material, but I want Shakespeare to be as clear to a 10-year-old who's never experienced Shakespeare before as I want it to be to somebody who's a Shakespeare academic. And so it makes the sharpest challenge, because if you use all of the tools that Shakespeare gives you, if you use the antithesis, if you use opposition, if you mine the complicated depths of the characters and let all of that land on the language without being indulgent, but really just play the music of the language, it is clear as a bell.
Right.
I really believe it. I really believe it.
Yes.
And I think there are some references that you just take out. You can take out because they're, even to the kind of most trained academic, it's not really going to ring in real time. So I wean out some of the references, and I try to make the cut of the piece as clear as possible. But in the playing, if much of Shakespeare still feels like it's ripped out of the headlines. It's one of the reasons why I think Shakespeare is so important. He still wrestles with themes in such a powerful way. And he does it on the language. I think we say in theater, you're off your voice, where Shakespeare is always front-footed. The arguments are on the language, and he's able to wrestle so articulately with two sides of an argument about something that we might be talking about today. I mean, Hamlet, Hamlet sat, I always want my work to sit on the nerve. I feel like Hamlet sat on the nerve. Measure for Measure sat on the nerve, which was the piece I did at the Old Globe. When you're looking at power, politics, betrayal, inheritance of a political system that you want to question and you might even want to overthrow, all of those things sit on the nerve of today. So I hope in my direction to make those arguments as clear as possible. To me, there's no, sometimes people will come in an audition and I say, no, it's not about a voice, it's not about any of that. It's about the clarity and connection with the language to make the argument as complex and yet as clear as possible, and to let it land with you emotionally the way it resonates with you today. And if you do that, I think the work is incredibly clear, and it's been proven to be so. You go to prisons. You go to our first production of Measure for Measure was at a shelter here, and the men. It was a men's shelter, so it was a male audience, and the men were completely with us and responding in a way that I think people used to respond more in Shakespeare's time. Sometimes audiences get a little polite and they sit back. That wasn't how the Shakespeare audience reacted, and I think actually the contribution of the audience, it's what makes touring productions, to me, more alive often than sit-down traditional theater productions, because there's a call and response in the way that is more true to Shakespeare's time.
Very much so, yes. And so the Measure for Measure that you mentioned, the touring, was done here in San Diego, where the Old Globe took Shakespeare to neighborhoods, to the hood. And so that's taking Shakespeare to them. What would you say to, let's say, a black person who's on the fence considering Shakespeare, but perhaps, they're on the fence? What would you say to them about attending a Shakespearean play?
Well, I think this is a broad statement, but I'll speak it broadly. I'm from the Virgin Islands, and I know the way we grew up speaking, telling stories. There was a musicality, there was a poetry, and there was a politics in almost every conversation, growing up. And I think that is very alive in Shakespeare. So I think knowing that, if done well, because there's a lot of Shakespeare that is not done well, and so I think that Shakespeare can feel convoluted, or can feel like it's trying to speak above, or and there's also been a classist agenda. There have been times where people have executed Shakespeare as a way of actually reinforcing a classist system. So I understand that there's a lot of reasons why there might be pushback. But if you can open yourself up to, and give it a chance, right? If you can go to the right place and give it a chance, you might hear a turn of phrase that feels so relevant to that argument you were just having with your dad. You might hear a turn of phrase that helps to articulate the way you feel about the person that you love. I think there are gifts, there are tools in Shakespeare that can be really relevant and really powerful and really fun. The other thing is, Shakespeare was funny, he was bawdy, he was violent. I mean, he was a blockbuster, again, if done well, not in a kind of dusty way. He was doing what blockbuster movies are trying to do now. Correct. Wrestling with love, wrestling with violence, wrestling with betrayal, wrestling with all of those things. And so I think if you can give it a chance, I think it could be really enriching and really resonating.
So Patricia, you co-founded an artist collective called Angela's Pulse with your sister Paloma McGregor, who's a choreographer. What was the inspiration behind Angela's Pulse? Well,
our mother's name is Angela, and she's a painter, and she's also an activist. She is her art, her teaching, her union work has always taught us that every step you take should be trying to make the world the place that you want it to be for you and the people that you love. And so from a very young age, some of our first performances were, performing on a picket line because she was helping to organize teachers for better wages, and so we've always seen her as an artist and an activist, and those things have always been a thread together. She also has red hair, so there's a kind of like the L in Angela's Pulse on our logo is a nod to our artist activist mom with her red hair and that thread of artist and activism holding hands. So it's named after her, and it also came out of an impulse. Our first real project together was Patricia Smith wrote this great book of personification poems called Blood Dazzler about Hurricane Katrina and the aftermath. And so we created this piece, and it was a new form. Often the work that we do, people are like, how do we define it? Is it theater? Is it dance? Is it? And we call it, we call them experiences. And so Angela's Pulse came out of creating this piece, Blood Dazzler, getting a really great response to it and saying, we actually want to be in the driver's seat of producing and making opportunities for other people to produce their work. So we're not going to wait around for an opportunity. We're actually going to see a story that wants to be told and organize the forces together to help tell that story and find the audience and all of that. And my sister has really run with it in the last couple of years. One of the most exciting projects out of it, she has a piece called Dancing While Black, and it's a curatorial and performance arm of Angela's Pulse, where she brings together people to talk about, because she was a dancer and choreographer. Right. She worked with Urban Bush Women, she worked with Liz Lerman, and she really saw both in the critical lens a big hole in talking about Black dance, what it means to be a Black dancer, what it means, so she's gotten everyone from Bill T. Jones, Camille Brown, all kinds of wonderful dancers and choreographers to do roundtables and talk about what is the state of Black dance, what does it mean to be a Black dancer, and produce work. And so we're always looking for opportunities to fill the holes of either a story that's not being told or being produced, or a conversation that's not being had, or an activation that's not happening, and using those performances and using those conversations to try and activate something in the world that's hopefully in line with what our mom would be doing.
That's beautiful. That's a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
And so we hear rumor. It's just rumor rumbling about that you're getting ready to direct your first film.
Yes.
With NWB Imaging, as a matter of fact. This is how the rumor goes. Can you confirm or deny this rumor?
We can confirm it.
Oh,
we can confirm it.
You've heard it first time here at Theater Corner.
Yes.
Patricia McGregor is going to film, and it's going to be an amazing thing, I understand.
Yes. Well, it's an exciting, something very powerful happened to me. I was in Beijing about 7 years ago, and directing a theater piece, and I saw in the hutongs, which are the side streets, there were these two little boys on these little mobile type devices, and they were watching an independent film that had just come out that year. And I remember thinking, wow, these two young boys in Beijing speaking Mandarin to each other are having a conversation with the art makers that made that film in America. And the power of that, I mean, the ability to have, I love theater, I will never give up my love for what I think is so powerful in that intimate conversation, but the ability to extend the audience and also to be able to capture in a very precise way each frame of the storytelling is very appealing to me. And I think we're in a golden age of television, definitely right now, and also film. I feel like we're able to tell stories in an out-of-the-box kind of way. And it's really thrilling to me to be able to kind of make that transition in my first foray into that seat, that driver's seat.
Exciting times.
Yes, very exciting times.
So besides the film, what can we see for Patricia McGregor, the director, in 2017? Well,
I have the next theater project is one I'm co-writing with Coleman Domingo, a very wonderful artist of television, screen, and the stage, and it's about Nat King Cole, so that's going to go on at People's Light in the fall. There's also, I don't feel like I can fully officially announce what it is, but I've been asked to direct an international concert tour for pretty major recording artists.
Wow.
So figuring out how to translate, he has a very specific story arc that he wants to tell. So hopefully we'll be able to announce who that is soon.
Okay.
But that's going to be a big part of the next several months. And then really the transition into doing some more television and film work. I've said no to a lot of things to try and clear some space. I have a wonderful friend at HBO, Kelly Edwards, who's been making some opportunities available. And so I would say those are the three projects, the concert tour, the Nat King Cole piece, and then the short film and some television things. That's what's next for me.
Exciting, exciting.
Yeah, it is
All
exciting.
right. Well, again, thank you so
Thank you, my
very
brother.
much, sister.
Thank you, my brother.
For coming by.
My pleasure.
Gracing Theater Corner.
Thank you.
And thank you, viewers, for tuning in for another episode. And we'll see you next time on Theater Corner.
Thank you.